Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome to my kitchen. Hope we're all good. Should come up in a second. So, Irish soda bread. It's St. Patrick's Day. How exciting is that? I know this is like not the way that we thought we'd be spending it, but that's okay. We're gonna make some Irish soda bread and it's gonna be delicious. This is what we're looking for at the end. We're gonna try, I made this the other day. This is like a really traditional Irish soda bread that we're gonna be making. So it's this particular loaf that I made here actually has a combination of whole wheat flour and all-purpose flour. The one we're gonna be making today is just all-purpose flour because that's what you guys probably have at home. So you can see it's a pretty tight crumb structure, and you'll also notice there's nothing in it. So when I was doing my research, I realized that I learned that there's typically no add-ins when it comes to Irish soda bread. So this one's plain, but that doesn't mean that you can't add in whatever you want to add in to your Irish soda bread. That could be things like caraway seeds, that could be raisins, whatever you want. So that we have this one. We've had corned beef and cabbage for the last couple nights, so we've been going to town on this. Anyway, so I have that one. So what I'm going to show you is actually how to make the Irish soda bread using regular milk, although the recipe calls for buttermilk. One of the things that I want to promote here is like you can do this at home right now. If you don't have buttermilk, that's okay. What you can do is you can take regular milk and you can take a lemon and you can make your own buttermilk, okay? I'm going to wash my hands again and then I'm going to get started. So if you're cooking along with me, wash your hands now and we'll get started. I'm sure everybody's like kind of over the whole hand washing thing now. But there's some really good songs that came out. Being from Philly, I really liked the Fresh Prince one. I was a big fan of that. I told you that if you're watching and you're in my class, remember I talked about that one. So that's what we're looking for. Make sure we have nice clean hands. And of course, warm water. So, lemon juice and milk. So what you can do in order to make buttermilk, you can actually mix part milk and part lemon juice, and what it does is it sort of like curdles the milk. It makes it a cultured dairy product, which is exactly what buttermilk is. So you do need the lemon in the actual milk in order to make the baking soda have its chemical reaction that you're looking for. So make sure you do that. If you don't have buttermilk and you just use milk, you'll notice that yours is completely flat because it doesn't have enough acid or doesn't have any acid in order to create that chemical reaction. So we have to make sure that that happens. All right. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out my milk. And the reason I'm measuring this first instead of what, sometimes you normally do, which would be doing your dry ingredients and then doing your wet ingredients, the reason I'm measuring this out is because I have to make that buttermilk first, okay? So I'm going to measure to 1.5 cups. Okay, so I'm definitely getting down on eye level, right at 1.5. Great job, Mrs. Kerr. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a small bowl in order to make the lemon juice. And then I'll measure from there. So I have this really cool, all right. So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to add in our dry ingredients to our bowl. Let me make sure I can see this. I'm going to tilt this down just a little bit so you guys can see. I might lose my head a little. That's okay. So I'm going to measure all my dry ingredients into this bowl. The method here, you guys know, is scoop and scrape. So you want to make sure that you have a straight spatula. You want to make sure that you have some kind of scoop. So I just use a spoon. And then you want to make sure that you have your dry measuring cups. If we're measuring flour, using dry measuring cups. Okay? And we're going to measure 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Okay. So I forgot to mention to you guys, and this is, you know, we do this at home all the time, and the first thing in our recipe, preheat the oven. So I'm going to make sure I have my oven on. For this recipe, it's asking for 450. So we're going to start at 450, and then we're going to bring it down to 400 partway into the cooking process. I'll explain why we're going to do that when we get to actually putting it in there. So here's my first cup of flour. There's one. Two. Three. You guys always ask if I do actually cook like this at home. Yes, yes I do. That's 3, and then we're going to add a half a cup in. Okay, so that's my flour. So again, if you wanted to, I found some research saying that the more traditional method of making Irish soda bread was to do it with some whole wheat flour. So if you wanted to do a super traditional Irish soda bread, you can add, instead of 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour, you could do 3 cups of all-purpose flour and a half a cup of whole wheat flour, which would be a fun option for you if you were into that. You can just check and see how we're doing over here. All right, looking good, guys. Looking good. Looks like it's a little glitchy, but that's okay. Hopefully you guys are able to see it if you want to see it. No chats yet, no comments. It does say 3 people are watching. I'm not sure who those 3 people are. Oh, we just lost one. That's okay. All right, so hopefully you guys are catching this. All right, so the 3.5 cups are in there. So the next thing we're going to add in is a half a teaspoon of sea salt. I don't have sea salt at home, so I'm just going to use some iodized salt. The deal with salt is it has different saltiness, right? And then it has different structures. So the different structures of the different salts will do different things in your recipe. With this one, it's not going to make that big of a difference in terms of the kind of salt that I'm using. Definitely flavor-wise, if I added sea salt, it would taste saltier. The sea salt is one of these saltier tasting salts. I'm just giving my milk a stir over here. But that'll do just fine. In terms of chemical reactions in my soda bread, the iodized salt is just fine. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to add in there is 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. So it's really, really important that I measure out this baking soda accurately so that I get the right reaction in my soda bread. So I have half a teaspoon of baking soda. Half a teaspoon of baking soda plus a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda in order to get that 3/4 teaspoon. Okay. Now the original recipe that I was reading says to sift, but I had done reading years ago that said that you don't have to sift flour so long as you whisk it really well. In studies and in experiments, so there was the word. What they have found is that it does virtually the same thing in the terms of the amount of volume that you're building in. So if you whisk it really, really well, you're going to get both all of your ingredients mixed in and the volume that you're looking for. So I'm going to mix that together really well. There's like nothing to this recipe. It's super duper simple. Okay. Mix together, mix together. Very good. Let's check and see how we're doing over here. Okay. If you're watching, say hi. Let me know you are. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay, so now I have my dry ingredients mixed together. I have my wet ingredients ready to go. So if I have my dry and my wet separate, that means I'm doing a specific mixing method here. This is known as the muffin method. Okay, good. I'm so glad you guys got that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a well in the center of our bowl. And we're going to pour the buttermilk down into the center of that well and then bring it together. In terms of what I'm going to use to bring it all together, I'm fine using a rubber spatula, a wooden spoon, whatever you prefer. I'm going to use a rubber spatula. If you're one of my students and you're watching, you know I am a huge fan and huge proponent of rubber spatulas for like almost everything. I find them to be a really, really great multitasker. All right. So this buttermilk that we've created now, there we go, is going to go right into the center of my well. And you'll notice in terms of the ratio of liquid to wet ingredients, there's a pretty good amount of liquid ingredients here, although we do have 3.5 cups of flour. So it's more than, say, if you were making a yeast spread or something that has a little bit less of the liquid ingredient there. Let me grab my rubber spatula. Okay, so I have my rubber spatula here. I'm going to get started in just a second bringing this together. I kind of can't check on the stream or the chat once I kind of get this going. So I want to make sure that if anybody is checking us out, that if you want to say something, say it now so I can respond. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start bringing this together. Bring that closer, is that better? And it's very bright. So I'm going to start to bring this together. And I'm just kind of doing like a slow bring together. What I'm looking for is for the flour to slowly absorb that buttermilk that it made. Okay. So I pretty much brought it together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to flour my surface a little bit so that it won't stick. And then I'm going to use this guy. So if you're not familiar with what this is, it's called a bench scraper. For bread bakers, this is called the bench. So it's my countertop, but essentially they call it the bench. And so I'm able to scrape the bench. I'm able to cut things. You probably have seen this used before, but maybe you didn't know what the name is, but this is a bench scraper. So I'm going to turn my dough out onto a floured surface, and I'm just going to lightly knead it. I'm not going crazy, but you'll notice that I use my bench scraper in that kneading process in order to make it a little easier for me to work with it without getting my hands like totally crazy covered in dough, which can happen. The dough should be, you know, sticky. It should be wet, but it shouldn't be like everywhere in terms of the type of dough that this is. We don't want to overwork it, but we do need to knead it a little bit. If you know about making anything with flour, we are going to be developing some gluten here. So wheat has a protein called gluten in it. And so when we bring it together with water, what we're going to be doing is developing that gluten as we knead it a little bit. I'm going to also do a little bit of flour on the top in order to keep it from being super duper duper sticky. Not a ton though. I don't want to add too much to my dough. I don't want to change the ratio of flour to liquid ingredients. Okay, so just a little over the top. And then I'm going to start bringing this together. So I'm going to use my bench scraper here, and I'm just going to start to fold. So the kneading process is really just folding and pressing. So that's essentially what I'm going to be doing. And you'll notice that bench scraper really does help me keep my hands so much cleaner than if I were to do this by hand. Because of the type of dough that this is, we're not going to be kneading it like crazy, like a bread dough that was made with yeast. But this particular kind, it's a lot wetter, so it keeps it a little neater, okay? We don't need to go crazy here, just a few times to bring it together, and then we're going to shape it into a round, okay? I'm going to shape it into a round. I'm going to flip it over when I do that. I'm going to bring in here my baking pan. So what you'll notice is that I have lined my baking sheet with some parchment paper. You don't have to do this, because we're also going to put some butter on the baking, for me, I'm going to put a little butter on the parchment paper, but you can also put butter on the baking sheet. Here's the reason why. I'm just lazy. That's really it. So I put butter on my parchment paper to prevent me from having to, or I use parchment paper to prevent me from having to wash a ton of grease or anything else off of my baking sheet. I'll give it a rinse. But really, I don't have to go crazy washing it, whereas I might get stuck on stuff if I just use my baking sheet as is. All right, let me grab some butter. Okay. Let me see if I have a clean finger here. Let's see. Still doing good. All right, we're doing okay. Hey, we got a like. That's pretty awesome. All right, so I'm going to take my butter here, and I'm just going to open it up. And you notice I'm keeping one end on, and the reason that I'm doing that is so I can kind of use it as a holder. And I'm going to kind of go like this over top of my parchment paper, just at the center, okay? And then I'm going to take and put my loaf, and I'm just going to kind of round it off as I'm going around here. And I'm going to put that right in the center. Okay, now what it says is we want this to be about 1.5 inches thick. So I am going to press it down. I'm going to pull this down so you guys can see this a little better. There we go. I'm going to press this down into that round. This is really nice dough. And we're going to get it to be about 1.5 inches thick. Now you might be asking yourself, well, how did we get that much rise in the center if it's this flat? I mean, this is much flatter than I would have thought that an Irish soda bread would have been. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. The deal is that baking